So, how do the world's biggest companies look into a super uncertain climate future and still make these huge billion-dollar bets? It's a massive question, right? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the powerful tool they use to get a handle on it. It's all about something called climate scenarios.
All right, just for a second, put yourself in the shoes of a CEO. Seriously. You've got to make these massive billion-dollar decisions. Where to build your next factory, what new products to invent, how to manage your supply chains, not just for next year, but for decades. How on earth do you do that when you have no idea if the world is going to act fast on climate change or, well, really slowly? Well, the answer, interestingly enough, comes from the world of finance. You know how after financial crisis, banks have to run these stress tests? Companies are now doing basically the same thing, but they're not stress testing for a market crash, they're doing it for the climate. It's a way to map out all the different possibilities instead of trying to predict something that's, let's be honest, impossible to predict.
So, what is this tool, really? At its heart, it's about creating a map for uncertainty. Okay, so the official term is climate scenario analysis. And look, the key word here is explore, not predict. This thing is not a crystal ball. It's really just a tool for asking, what if? What if we go all in on renewables, or what if we don't? By exploring these different paths, a company can build a strategy that's way more resilient, no matter which way the wind blows. And this whole analysis often boils down to two very different potential futures. And you guessed it, each one comes with its own unique set of risks. Okay, so this really frames the fundamental trade-off. On one hand, you have a world that acts fast. Here, the main danger is what we call transition risk. Think new carbon taxes, sudden regulations popping up, entire markets shifting overnight. But on the other hand, what if the world acts slowly? Well, then the danger is physical risk. We're talking about the direct impacts, the floods, the heat waves, the droughts. The reality is, every single company faces a mix of both, and these scenarios just help them explore the absolute extremes. So you might be wondering, how do companies actually do this? I mean, it sounds incredibly complex, right? But the process can actually be broken down into a surprisingly straightforward three-step playbook. It's pretty logical, really. First, you choose your futures, your scenarios. Then, you analyze the risks, what they'd actually mean for the business. And finally, you report your findings. So let's break down each of those steps. All right, step one is all about setting the stage. A company has to decide on its focus. Are we talking about global operations or just what's happening in North America? Are we looking 10 years out or 30? Then they pick from established scenarios, usually pitting a world that limits warming to, say, 2 degrees Celsius against a much more severe 4-degree future. And they often use public models to do this, from groups like the International Energy Agency. Step two is where the real number crunching happens. For each of those futures they just picked, they start to model the financial impact. Like, what does a $100 per ton carbon price actually do to our bottom line? What's the cost if our key manufacturing region suddenly faces massive water shortages? But, and this is important, this is also where they can spot opportunities, new markets, cool new technologies, maybe even ways to get a leg up on the competition. And what's great is that companies don't have to boil the ocean all at once. Someone who's a newcomer to this might start with a qualitative approach, more of a discussion, a story about the biggest risks. But later on, they can graduate to a fully quantitative, advanced analysis, really running the hard numbers. The most important thing is just to get started. And finally, step three, reporting. And this isn't just for some internal memo that gets filed away. The real goal here is moving toward full transparency. Why? Because investors are demanding it. And you know what? Regulators are starting to require it. Okay, so that's the playbook. But what does this all look like in the real world? Let's dive into a couple of real-life examples. So our first case study is AGL Energy. They're one of Australia's largest emitters. I mean, as a huge player in the energy sector, they're right on the front lines of that transition risk we talked about. So, naturally, they decided to run their own scenario analysis to see what a 2-degree world would actually mean for their business. And the result? Honestly, it was staggering. In a 2-degree world, AGL projected a potential loss of 25% of its economic value. Think about that. A quarter of the company's value, just gone. This is exactly the kind of jaw-dropping bottom-line insight this analysis is designed to provide. But here's the critical question that the source material brings up. Since the company did the analysis itself, is there a chance it's a little biased? I mean, AGL is a major coal producer, and some critics are asking, is a 25% loss actually understating the risk? It's such a key thing to remember.
Who is doing the analysis really, really matters.
Okay, now let's switch gears. We're going to go from a single company to a much broader view, a global investment portfolio. In this case, the challenge was totally different. It was to screen the portfolio's exposure to physical risks, things like heat waves and flooding, across hundreds of different companies they'd invested in.
And this is what they found. The analysis pinpointed these critical hotspots of risk. It was able to flag specific countries like the USA, China, and India. It highlighted entire industry sectors like utilities and agriculture. And it even drilled down to individual assets that were super exposed in a 4-degree warming scenario. This gives investors a roadmap to see their biggest vulnerabilities and actually start to manage that risk.
So let's bring it all together. What does this all mean for the future? Well, this isn't just some technical exercise for corporate accountants anymore. It's driving a fundamental shift towards much greater transparency. And look, this stuff matters to all of us. For one, it helps protect our investments from hidden climate risks. It pushes companies to become more resilient, which, strengthens the entire economy. And by forcing businesses to actually confront these different futures, it can seriously accelerate the search for real solutions. This isn't just some passing trend. It's quickly becoming the new standard of how you do business. So, here's the crucial point. Scenario analysis isn't just about playing defense. As this quote makes so clear, it's also about playing offense. The companies that really get a handle on this future landscape are the ones that are going to be best positioned to seize the massive opportunities that come with building a low-carbon economy.
And that leaves us with one final thought. As this kind of reporting goes from being voluntary to being mandatory, it's going to separate the leaders from the laggards, for sure. So the big question for the next decade is this: which companies will be ready and which ones will be left exposed?